Killing a CEO is not the way you change. You have to regulate them, right? And so we've got attempts to try to rein in some of these big businesses. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was your creation. The Trump administration wants to get rid of it. That is like protecting people from like credit card fraud. What happens if that goes away?
So look, terrible for individuals, but stop and think overall about the social contract. Part of the deal in how we've kept this democracy, this economy, this country on a fairly steady path for more than 200 years has been that those at the top pay a little more in taxes, are a little less rich than they otherwise might be, and everybody else at least gets a chance. And what happens when you turn this into the billionaires run it all is they get the opportunity to squeeze every last penny. And look, we'll say it over and over. Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of UnitedHealth. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Now, you can imagine how much outrage Senator Elizabeth Warren sparked when she dared to say that after the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, that people have been pushed too far by a predatory health insurance system. Most videos of her comments stopped there because they didn't want anyone to hear the next part.
We need regulation, in part, to rein those guys in. And you know where this is coming big time ahead of us is on taxes. That the big boys, just like you said, their plan is to rush through this tax plan right at the beginning of 2025, give themselves a bunch more tax breaks, and then put the real burden of running this country on ordinary, hard-working
that will pay the tariff. That will pay the tariff. They're going to pay, and it's paying at the bottom.
They can pay for it in taxes.
Absolutely.
But the whole point is shove the cost somewhere else
onto the poor people
and
make them subsidize the rich.
One more way for billionaires to pick the pocket.
It seems like there's going to be a lot of confusion between Trump voters and his billionaire buddies in the next few years. The pundits and politicians that are grabbing their pearls and suggesting that Senator Warren is somehow inciting more people to murder CEOs are hell-bent on calling the response a, quote, left-wing celebration of murder. They're hoping that their voters will be more concerned with being against the left that they've demonized than recognizing that MAGA is all about this predatory system that has so many Trump voters raging. But Senator Warren focused in on what politicians need to do to rein in the insatiable greed of corporations. The responsibility of our elected leaders should have to represent our lives. She brought up how the donor class has paid Trump to give even more tax breaks to the very same types of people that both Democrats and Republicans are now railing against. It'd be devastating for their voters to recognize the game for what it is. So the demonization of Warren is necessary to make people ignore her valid points. Meet the Press even tried to get Bernie Sanders to condemn her.
Senator Warren quickly clarified. She said, violence is never the answer, period. I should have been much clearer that there is never a justification for murder. My big picture question for you, though, Senator, is this the right time in the wake of this horrific murder to be talking about health care policy?
Look, Elizabeth Warren obviously understands killing and murder and shooting somebody in the back is totally unacceptable. But what I think has happened in the last few months is that what you have seen rising up is people's anger at a health insurance industry which denies people the health care that they desperately need while they make billions and billions of dollars in profit. So killing anybody, shooting somebody in the back who's the father of two is outrageous. It is unacceptable. Nobody should applaud it. I know Senator Warren did not. But I think what we need to ask ourselves when we talk about health care is why we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, why we have a life expectancy which is significantly lower than in other countries, why working class people die 5 to 10 years shorter than the people on top.
But it's the same thing Bernie Sanders has been saying for decades. But he's been blown off by both Democrats and Republicans that have always been beholden to their wealthy donors that shape our policies. These bought politicians don't want anyone to start focusing in on how most of them work damn near under the guidance of corporations and billionaires to fix our system in their favor.
Listen, I think that political leaders in this country need to be part of this conversation that's happening all over the country in the wake of the shooting of the UnitedHealthcare CEO. What I see happening in this country, though, is a real visceral anger that the outrage at Brian Thompson's death or the outrage at the death of any powerful person isn't matched by the anger over the thousands of people who die, often anonymous deaths, every single day in this country at the hands of a healthcare industry that mostly doesn't give a shit about people and only cares about profits. Ordinary people in this country are not indifferent to the loss of life, but these companies are. Why do I know this? Why do millions of Americans know this? Because the business model of the healthcare industry is to deny care, necessary medical care to people who need it, and force them into bankruptcy, or worse, let them die in order to grow profit.
Senator Chris Murphy, he's smart enough to realize that while many in powerful and influential positions are wagging their finger at the overwhelming response from Americans sick of being taken advantage of, he can be a part of a movement that actually listens to the frustration and also tries to do something about it. It's literally what we vote our representatives into office to do, but we've accepted them just ignoring our concerns while blaming our problems on anything except for the actual culprits.
Murder is never justified. It isn't. But if this country's leaders don't pay attention to the conversation that is happening right now this weekend, that is a mistake. People in America today feel ignored, they feel scared, they feel alone in a system that intentionally grinds them down, a system where profit matters more than life. My colleagues need to listen, and they need to do something about it.
There's only so much this coalition of bought politicians and predatory corporations can get away with in front of us. These elected officials are mostly concerned with getting their jobs and keeping their jobs. But the more desperate people are, due to the ways the ruling class fixes the system, the more we see how ridiculous it is. There's nowhere to politically hide anymore. It's got Brian Thompson's boss, Andrew Whitty, trying to make his case to his employees in a video that one of them, of course, leaked to Ken Klippenstein.
I'm sure everybody has been disturbed by the amount of negative and in many cases vitriolic media and commentary that has been produced over the last few days, particularly in the social media environment. We are going to continue to make sure that we put patients, consumers and members first, as we always have done. The mission of this company is truly to make sure that we help the system improve by helping the experience for individuals get better and better. There was nobody who did more to try and advance that mission than Brian Thompson. And there are very few people in the history of the US healthcare industry who had a bigger positive effect on American healthcare than Brian. And we are going to make sure that we not only acknowledge and honor that legacy of Brian, but we'll continue it. Our role is a critical role, and we make sure that care is safe, appropriate, and is delivered when people need it.
Yeah, he must have assumed someone would leak this, which is why he oddly decided to paint a picture of the health and insurance industry that doesn't match many customers' reality. But he still continued on.
I encourage you to tune out that critical noise that we're hearing right now. It does not reflect reality. It is simply a sign of an era in which we live. What we must do is focus on what we know to be true. And what we know to be true is that the health system needs a company like United Health Group, and it needs people like Brian within it. We're fortunate that within this company, we have so many people driven and inspired in the same way that Brian was. And we will continue in our journey to help everybody who needs it within the health environment.
It didn't take long for Whitty to change his tune in the wake of no critics suddenly forgetting how much we've been taken advantage of, and that the system they solely enjoy is the problem. Empty declarations won't change the facts. And Axios reported that in an op-ed that Whitty wrote, the health system does not work as well as it should, and we understand people's frustrations with it. No one would design a system like the one we have, and no one did. It's a patchwork built over decades. Our mission is to help make it work better. We're willing to partner with anyone to find ways to deliver high-quality care and lower costs. But he still showed that he still doesn't believe his change of tune when he went back to his original sentiment by also writing, Thompson pushed us to build dedicated teams to help the sickest people navigate the health system, and fought for preventative health and quality health outcomes rather than simply adding ever more tests and procedures. Now, it might be best to change course than to keep reiterating these statements out of a marketing department that keep getting proven dishonest. Because ProPublica just released an expose on a leaked UnitedHealthcare report about limiting child health care services to cut costs. The damning internal documents obtained by ProPublica reveal that the company has implemented cost-cutting measures targeted applied behavior analysis, ABA, a widely recognized therapy for children with autism. UnitedHealth's report acknowledges ABA as, quote, evidence-based gold standard treatment, but outlines strategies to reduce its availability. These include removing providers from their network and denying therapy hours requested by clinicians. The strategy primarily targets those children who are the poorest and most vulnerable, covered through the company's state-contracted Medicaid plans. One bullet point in the document suggests terminating cost outliers, even in regions with long wait lists. The strategy has already impacted up to 19% of patients receiving ABA therapy in some states. The reality of what so many people have been conditioned to put up with continues to become common knowledge, with an energy that simply won't put up with it anymore. It's hard to reprimand people about death when our system encourages it for corporate greed. But still, folks like former Congressman Trey Gowdy think that it's a winning argument.
Thompson did nothing to Mangione. Mangione was not a client, he was not a patient, he was not a customer of UnitedHealthcare, but that didn't stop Elizabeth Warren from saying the quiet, sinister part out loud. Take matters into their own hands. Is that what we're calling murder now? What do you think a jury trial is, Professor Warren? That's the people taking matters into their own hands. It's called justice. Not executing someone on the street. That's actually called murder. There's a pretty big difference between a trial and an execution, and even a recovering law professor should get that. Counselor, I know the squad and Elizabeth Warren and Jamal Bowman have some really insane views on criminal justice, but celebrating the murder of an executive, is that their version of populism, killing CEOs?
And look, to the extent that they're justifying this, what they're doing even worse is they're tacitly encouraging copycats, which underscores why you need a vigorous prosecution to effectively say, no, there is going to be accountability. That will have hopefully a deterrent effect and discourage copycats.